Multiple choices. A lot of them, it printed twice, so you can't read the score, but you can read the percentage. And there's a piece of paper there that has all the percentages with how they relate to the score. Here comes your results. Debate number 1. The affirmative team, Cedar, Catherine, Lexi, so on, won by 15-6. I don't want to hurt anybody's feelings here, but debate number 2 was the only sweep this year. Jake and Kieran and Alex and Marlon
the topics are too
got all 21 votes. James, Baylor, Austin, and Noah, you couldn't flip a single vote.
Oh my God.
Debate number 3. Sarah, Gabby, Paul, and Kevin lost to Bodie, Lauren, Raina, and Marina.
Okay. Wait, what was the thing?
9-17. No arguing that. And debate number 4, Brian, Kiara, Cedric, and Nick crushed 19-6. Would anybody like to see their ballots?
Yeah.
Which debate number were you?
Number 1.
No need to see.
So, it's maybe.
Which one?
No,
3? She's got it.
Wait, debate 1 and 2 were the same topic?
No.
You have 3?
Anybody else want to see their ballots? Yeah. 4?
Dude, that's machine guns.
Yeah.
Has that ever happened before? A complete sweep?
Yeah, a couple. Over the years, it happens from time to time. This year, there was a slight bias toward the affirmative teams.
So much easier.
Debate number 3 had no bias. Debate numbers 2 and 4 had a subtle but statistically insignificant bias, 4-2. But that could have gone the other way with just a few votes in both debates. Debate number 1 seemed to be pretty strictly. Only one period had the no side win, and they didn't win by much. But debate number 1 had almost all yes sides win. Over the years, just so you know, that has gone the other way. I think in that first debate, the only way that the yes side can win is that the no side can win is by imagining the tyranny of life without a hope for family, focusing on the way that humans value family. Maybe teenagers don't quite feel that as much.
For debate number 1?
Yeah. Was that number 1 or number 2?
Number 2.
Oh, that was number 2? Go. What was the debate number 1?
Number 1.
Number 1 was 4 and 2 was A and population control and aid. Number 1.
Oh, aid population control. Yeah, that's that one. The no is pretty easy to win over the years. It's actually been more no than yes about humanitarianism and global equality and the poorest nations not being the ones that can, that it being an impossible request to make. It's like demanding that a child juggle before you will feed him or something. It's just not rational. Okay. Good times. Let's get into some study goals. There's a lot to do. The exam is Friday. We may not even be able to look at the Unit 5 test tomorrow because the time is so short. Yeah, but I was going to say, you thought you did?
Yeah.
So what's the essay?
There will be no loser's essay.
Really?
Thank you.
I've a couple of times in the past I have skipped it when it seems like everybody's more or less taking it seriously. I think everybody sort of showed up and tried. The one problem that I do have, which is separate from so good news, nobody has to do the loser's essay. Bad news. I want to be really clear that everybody had a lot of time to work on this. And think about what it does when people in your group don't help you. I think it sets a really bad precedent. We have a couple of group projects coming up that are massive. I also think when somebody says, "Nah, you got this," that they have they've not only decided that they're okay with the failure, but they've sort of skipped out on their responsibility to help you. Everybody had numerous weeks to reach out. You know, if you guys sort of agree, like, yeah, we'll get on this later, but you're in touch, at least you're both at fault. But if somebody was like, yo, dude, I really need some help, let's meet, let's talk, let's do this, and then people are like blowing you off, I don't think it's good for anybody for you to give that person full credit on this assignment. So students who cheated on the research, who turned in a copy of your notes, or who found some other way to skate by without participating in the research preparation, I really think you should snitch on them. I think you should do it anonymously if you want. And I think that it seems kind of fair that if there's a group of 3 and one person's okay lying for the other one and one person's not, and the person who's okay lying is also hurting your grade. I just encourage you to think about that. Like, what does it mean if you're letting people get a perfect score on this assignment? Since there's no loser essay, they would still be getting 50% on the assignment. And that seems more than fair. We're just showing up and your hard work getting them the 50%. No loser's essay to worry about. Yeah.
Do you still have 1 point if we lost?
No, the losers get the same score as the winners. Everybody, there's no loser's essay. So I think if you lied so somebody else could get by without doing research, I think you should take that back. You can send me an email or a text message or whatever, and it all comes down to facts. They can still prove it. They can still be like, no, look, here's my web browsing history, or like, here's that email I sent Marlon, or like whatever. Like they could still prove it if they had done work. But if they've done no work, they'll have no way to prove it. That's sort of a okay, whatever. Take out your 6.3. Okay, so how do we talk about number 57, bioaccumulation and biomagnification?
Doesn't that go with number 13?
Those are number 33?
Yeah.
We talked about this or not?
We didn't.
We did not?
We didn't do 57.
We did not do 57?
We didn't have tails.
Did we do 56?
Yeah.
Light pollution and stuff? Yeah, okay.
Because we talked about baby turtles.
This this demonstration is slightly complicated. Let's start with a question. Do you all remember that we talked about like trophic pyramids being shaped like this? Why does 1,000 acres of grass not make 1,000 acres of grasshopper?
Takes more energy.
His energy's lost every trophic level.
Energy's lost, 10% goes in. What happens to the other 90%? How is it lost? In the trophic system, where does that go?
Energy.
Heat energy. It's spent, right? They use the energy to turn into heat. Everybody agree with me on that? You remember we talked about apex predators like bears? The thing at the top of the food web. You need a lot of healthy ecosystem to support these, to support those, so that you can keep one of those apex animals. We talked about that? You remember this? When Jose eats 2,000 calories a day, is my food value, my calorie storage, growing by 2,000 calories a day?
No.
What happens to those calories?
Spent.
Yeah, spend them, right? But remember that your cells were shaped by a simpler environment. You evolved to handle very simple cellular transactions. In the environment where you evolved, if something with carbon and hydrogen got into your bloodstream, it was good. Right? It was sugar, it was fat, it was carbs. And those things were all rare. So your cells never had to be picky. They're not smart. They're not selective. They just go, oh yeah, carbon, hydrogen, great. That's probably sugar or fat. Sounds good, right? But you remember, please look up methylation, don't you? We talk about this? Where something stuck to a carbohydrate will make that look usable. Even if it's not usable, your cells will be like, oh yeah, that looks usable. And this, please look up, they cannot spend. They don't spend it. They don't use it. That does pile up. If they eat 1,000 pieces, they keep 1,000 pieces. Everybody feel me on that? This is a part of a very big lead-up. This is a 3-star concept. And by the way, this applies to your life. You'll have this conversation with your mommy and your daddy if you choose to. Watch me. That little fishy is eating stuff. Whatever it eats, I don't know. Those little squares could be little fish, and you'll notice that they disappear, right? You see how those little squares are disappearing? The squares are being used up. That fish might be growing by a little bit, but for the most part, that's just operating diet. Are we all clear on that? But what is piling up on that fish? The pennies, right? They look like little dots. The pennies.
Why does one of them like fall out?
Yeah, that's a good question. I don't know if that's supposed to represent the occasional mistake, if it was poop, or if it just fell off the model when somebody was making this. A former student teacher made this for me. Keep in mind, this is bioaccumulation. Cells making a mistake because they're stupid. You should write that down. Bioaccumulation, making a mistake. You're stupid.
I'm pretty sure this one doesn't fall.
Everybody in this row, take out your wallet and remove anything criminal from your wallet. Yeah, I'm going to look at it, so if you have anything personal or compromising, take it out. Now, I want everybody to keep in mind that being a teacher is really hard and we don't get paid a lot. So on the side, I'm also a pickpocket. This is a fact. Yeah, bomb wallet. So when I get a chance to steal a kid's wallet, I do. Bro, what are you doing? You babysit a lot, and you scalp them. Wow! You're like making more than me. I want to be a babysitter. Now, funny thing is, I'm not a very smart pickpocket. So I keep stuff that I can use, like this giant wad of money. Hear that? Might have. You don't do dimes, you've got wads. So this giant wad of money I'm going to spend. This will do me good. I'm going to go buy liquor and food and flowers for my wife, candy for my children. This, I'm keeping it and I'm going to use it. But this, it's like, oh yeah, that looks useful. I need an Alaska Department of Fish and Game hunting and fishing license. Then tomorrow, I find me another kid whose pocket I will pick. Much humbler means, but whatever. And likewise, I look in there and I'm like, oh sweet, a driver's license. If I get pulled over, I can pretend to be Cedric. I can buy booze or something. Then the next day, I find somebody else to pickpocket. Like this frequent diner card and cash wallet in Jake. And I think you all see where this is going. The cash I got from him, I'm going to use. But this card, we're going to pile it up. And daily, I do the same thing. Okay? So I find me some more cash. I want to spend this on. I want to spend that on alcohol.
Put it in on the
This is my last day at school.
Whatever. That's got all these cards. Okay. Keep in mind, in the course of my sleazy day, I will use up the cash. I will use up that cash. So I'm going to go to the store and I'm going to buy food, gifts for my children. Throughout the day, is this here?
He's like, I'll take it.
Is that okay? Is that right? Is that right? Okay. So, in the course of the day, I want to use those. But you can imagine, all of these cards I got, like nobody's gonna believe that this is me. Nobody's going to believe that my name is Alexandra. They're going to ask for my ID when I try to use these or something. So these, I'm going to just keep them and never really use them. Right? I'm not a very smart pickpocket. I'm not that selective. I keep whatever looks good. Some of it I use, some of it I don't. Now imagine, you guys realize that being a principal is not that lucrative either? So we have a staff meeting, and John Becchio bumps into me, takes my wallet, bumps into Doug Carlian, takes his wallet, bumps into Miss Nye, takes her wallet. And John Becchio will of course find a little bit of cash in each of those wallets, right? A little bit of cash that he's going to use up. But imagine in his wallet how many useless cards he's piling up. Does that make sense to everybody? He goes to a meeting over at the district with all the other principals, and those guys all have a little bit of cash in their wallets, but they've got a ton of useless cards. Do we agree? And the superintendent happens to be a pickpocket, and I've known David Cash for many years, and that man is a thief. Just kidding, boss. You can imagine that David Cash when he pickpockets all those principals, man, that guy's going to end up with just tons of useless cards. You see what I'm saying here? You following this?
You're so good at cards.
The concept there is that as you move up the food web, the concentration increases. This, students, is what we call biomagnification. Those little tiny fish, whatever their caloric value is, you know, like their sugar and their fat and their carbs, all that stuff that you would think is useful, that stuff does get spent. But whatever eats then will make the same stupid mistake, because none of our cells are very selective. Throughout the food web, if it accumulates, it magnifies. That's worth writing down.
Wait, what?
If it accumulates, it'll magnify. As a way to think about this, keep in mind that a bear does not have all the calories of 4 square miles of forest. Do we agree with that?
Yeah.
The 4 square miles of forest calories got spent. I'm very glad a few thousand, yeah, but that's it. Are we clear on that? But if it had accumulated some miscellaneous toxicity along the way, then that bear would have 4 square miles of toxicity. Agreed? It's like a big funnel. Right? Nobody spends it, so that just all gets piled up. Imagine like the state superintendent of schools. If everybody in education were pickpockets, and basically we are because we're all desperately poor. If the state superintendent of schools was himself or herself, a pickpocket, imagine all the useless cards in that person's wallet, right? If I get like 5 students a day, and the principal gets like 5 teachers a day, and the district guy gets like 5 principals a day, imagine by the time you get to the state superintendent of schools level, all the useless cards that have made it into his wallet, right?
I still don't understand the difference between biomagnification and bioaccumulation.
One of them is the simple cellular level of making a mistake. At the cell level, you just blow it. It's like, oh, she's cool. But mistake, that's bioaccumulation. Biomagnification is the pattern of concentrations in the food web. What happens to all those different species inside the food web? So I'll tell you guys a little story. The first major example of this goes back a really long time.
Example of which one?
First video.
It was called Lytigo-Bodig because there were 2 doctors who were fighting about what caused this disease, okay? Please look up. There's a place called Guam. It's this island. You may know it became really critical to the United States attack on Japan during World War II. It was like the leading edge of the war effort. Everybody know that? So, all the way over here, the United States would stage out of Hawaii, hit up Guam for some gasoline, and then go charge Japan. Guam is a tropical island. It has fresh water. It's really nice. And it was colonized very early by a Polynesian group called the Chamorro. You know I'm obsessed with Polynesians, right? The Chamorro lived on this island for a very, very, very long time, and they still have some measure of their culture. They teach their children traditional practice and religion, ceremonial battle and tattooage. They have a really cool calendar. As a fun little fact for you, they have a calendar that's all based on natural events and the relationship to the ocean. So the months of the calendar are sequential changes in the ocean, like when the humpback whales are close to the island, and when the big thunder clouds build up over the sea, and they're all like one after another after another. That's their calendar. I love that. FYI, like many Polynesians, they were sculptures. They built these amazing columns with flower pots on top that are kind of remarkable. And they were hunter-gatherer / simple agriculture, increasingly more agricultural as they were colonized by early Westerners. When Christianity came, they kind of changed their clothing, they kind of changed their diet, they started growing more and more pigs and eating less and less seafood. But they still had some of their ceremonial diet, including this one ingredient. We'll come back to that one ingredient. Apparently this disease did exist early in the record of the Chamorro people. This mystery disease that was a neurodegenerative disease like Lou Gehrig, Parkinson style. You lose control of your nervous system. You eventually get paralysis. Sooner or later you can't speak. Sooner or later you can't swallow. And shortly after that you can't breathe. Basically your body just freezes up. Your muscles stop responding. First the ones that you control, and later the ones that are on automatic. Miserable way to die. Totally miserable way to die. And by the time that America was really ramping up the war effort, by 1940, this had become the leading cause of death, and please look up, especially among healthy young men. Which really was kind of mysterious. There's not a lot of diseases that get men at their physical prime. Tensions grew. The Chamorro Indian accused the American military of poisoning their men. The Chamorro Indian suggested that they revolt and forced the American military off the island. There were physical confrontation. There was a lot of gossip. The American military invited a bunch of doctors to come help figure out what's going on because this was a very critical base in the war effort. And eventually the mystery was solved. It all comes down to the mystery food item. Anybody know what that is?
Wombat, maybe?
It's not a wombat. It's a
I don't know.
it's a flying fox. It's a flying fox.
Have you seen a wombat?
Definitely wombat, isn't it?
Oh, that's so good.
I'm right. It's a dog.
It's a flying fox, giant fruit bat.
Dragon.
Apparently, yeah, furry dragon. Apparently they're really not that intelligent. A college professor friend of mine from UCSB helped one of these recuperate when he was living in northern Australia. They're common throughout the Pacific. My buddy Sam helped one of these things recuperate. He found it injured and he took it home and he put a splint on its wing and it regained its flight, but it imprinted to living in my homie's apartment. And it basically became his alarm clock because when it would come home in the morning, it would fly into the ceiling fan every night and get slammed against the wall. So that's what would wake him up, was the bat bouncing off the wall and then limping across the floor to go climb into the closet. All that stuff is just trivia for you. What you do need to know is that these are what?
So, do you have a singing telegram for you?
Just go outside and close the door and then sing away. I wish I had the time to make this a priority.
It's like one of our shortest songs. We have to do it.
You are angelic singers, and I love every one of you, and I don't have the time for this.
Just hurry up,
go.
Do it.
Go.
You want to go? Go.
You're the only guy.
No?
Beautiful. Bye-bye.
Was that for you?
Never said who it was for.
Yeah.
What? That wasn't English, right?
No.
The only words I understood were
Alright,
bing
let's do
bong.
this fast.
That was spectacular, undeniably. But we gotta move on. So these big fat bats. These big fat bats eat these little tiny fruits. They're fruit bats, you know? These little tiny fruits have a big old pig.
That's Contagion.
And it's the thing that inspired the thing in Contagion. Wait. Those things were in Contagion because of the historical importance of this story. This was the first case of biomagnification. The mystery is that the Chamorro Indians eat these bats. When the U.S. military came to the island, the Chamorro sold all their pigs to the U.S. military, so their barbecue ended up having more and more bat and less pig. The bats eat fruit, the fruit grows on this tree, the tree grows in the ground, and in the ground there's a bacteria that has a toxin. That toxin helps the bacteria limit competition with other bacteria in the soil, so the ecology is kind of neat. But something about that toxin should stand out to you. Look at the bottom of the screen. Because this toxin is methylated, it's bad for you, but your cells don't know that. Your cells aren't smart, and neither are the cells of the bat, and neither are the cells of the tree. They just go, oh, cool, carbohydrate, that's like fat. And then, do you guys know what happens to all the sugars and fats that you cannot use? You do what with them?
Stored in fat.
Store them in your fatty tissues. And so that chemical called BMAA, it's got a giant name that I can't remember, is made at really low doses by the bacteria, just enough to kill off other bacteria. And that bacteria lives in the roots of the tree, so the tree absorbs those toxins, and the tree doesn't give a crap because the concentration goes up a little bit, but the tree's totally fine. The tree's fat storage is the fruit. You guys realize that when a plant makes a fruit, it puts all the sugar and fat into the fruit so that another animal would eat it and distribute the seeds? Are you aware of that? That's why fruit tastes good. So you spread the seed around. And so those foxes, look at that. Their body burden is huge because all they eat is the fat off the fruit. That's all they eat. And historically, the Chamorro ate some of this, but they ate some seafood, and then they shifted to eating some pig. And then when the U.S. military was buying up all their pigs, they ended up just like eating a whole bunch of bat. And who eats more barbecue than healthy, active young men? I mean, those 25 to 40-year-old men, they're like the peak barbecue consumers.
Is that because they're the ones actually going out and catching the foxes and stuff?
It may be because they're, but like in this culture, like in many other cultures, It's sort of like a macho bro thing to like get your protein on at the barbecue. And so the younger dudes just knock back the fruit bats like crazy. And you can imagine the concentration of this chemical in those humans reaches that threshold where it affects their nervous system and they get the Leite-Kopodik disease. This was the first case that showed biomagnification affecting humans. Then, this woman named Rachel Carson, you've heard this a number of stories by now, wrote a book called Silent Spring about how the DDT we spray in our agricultural world travels out to the ocean. And look at this. There's not that much in algae. The algae are fine. There's not that much in zooplankton. The zooplankton are fine. There's not that much in the secondary fish. They're also fine. But by the time you get to the very top of the food web, you know, like a bald eagle, they're eating the equivalent of like 10 square miles of ocean, right? You understand what I mean by that? Because like how many little things it takes to make the thing that keeps the bald eagle going? You know what I'm talking about? So that bald eagle, they're getting a ton of that DDT. And look at the concentration. See on the right? See how the concentration is growing? That's the magnification part. That's what magnifies. What grows is the concentration of toxins when you travel up the food web. If you didn't have that, you got to write that down. We have found that in some systems, please look up, from the water concentration of DDT into a large bird, that can magnify 8.3 million times. In the tissues of a big bird, compared to the water concentration, 8.3 million. Because imagine how long that bird lives, too. It's 10 square miles of ocean for 10 years. Does that make sense to everybody?
Is it just because the bird is fish and fish is build other fish and fish?
Right.
So it just builds all the way up to bird?
Right. It's never spent. Over all those years in all that area, that toxin is never made smaller. It's never used up. It just goes into storage. Yeah.
So the hydrocarbons or whatever that's attached to the chemical that we take up, do we use that or does it just stay there?
Very rarely can we react those out. And coincidentally, there's a lot of stuff that methylates naturally, some stuff that's methylated synthetically. And just so we're all clear, there's a lot of other carbohydrate compounds you'll absorb by accident. DDT is not methylated, but it is absorbed. Yeah?
Wait, so then the process of bioaccumulation is just all the accumulating of that?
Accumulation is one cell taking it in, or one organism storing
So
it.
bioaccumulation comes first. and then-
Yes.
okay.
Anything that accumulates will magnify up the food web. Like, for example, mercury in fish. How many of you have heard about not eating too much tuna because of the mercury poisoning, and if you're pregnant, you're not supposed to have like the fish up the food web? That's for real.
Really, is that like raw fish, not just tuna for pregnant women?
Well, the raw fish is for different reasons for pregnant women. The raw fish is not because of it's because their body has different response to parasites. They have different response to parasites. Okay. First of all, every single living thing has a little bit of gold and a little bit of silver and a little bit of mercury and a little bit of unobtainium and a little bit of everything. Everybody cool with that? Now watch. If I take all of you and I bury you in a mudslide and I wait 300 million years, you'll all be packed into a couple lumps of coal. Do we agree with that? And we're burning a lot of coal. We're also burning a lot of gasoline. We're also using a lot of other petroleum products. Do we all agree with that? So in the last 150 years, we've taken like 500 million years of life and we've burned it into the atmosphere. Are we all cool with that? So in the last 150 years, the atmosphere mercury concentration has really skyrocketed. It's still totally safe. You can breathe it. You're not going to get that much mercury in you. That's all good. Everybody understand that so far there's no problem? Atmosphere, there's a little more, but that's not going to kill you. But now imagine, all that stuff settles into the ocean, and if that mercury is methylated, remember we talked about methylation? There it is, right there. The word methylation. Where you take plain old mercury, and you attach a carbohydrate to it. Remember that? Now, watch me. Methylated mercury makes it into algae. The algae gets eaten by the plankton. The plankton gets eaten by the little fish gets eaten by the big fish gets eaten by a bigger fish, and that bigger fish gets eaten by the tuna. And the tuna stores it in the fattiest tissues, because fat is carbohydrate storage. And what's the best part of the tuna?
The fat.
The fatty part. It's called toro. The best sushi, one of the world's most sought after foods by weight, has some of the highest concentrations of mercury you can find anywhere on Earth. Because think about this. That big old tuna lived for many, many years, 20, 30, 50, 100 years. Eating fish, that ate bugs, that ate algae, for hundreds of square miles for decades. So all that mercury is like in the thing, in the thing, in the thing, in the thing, in the tuna, in that one little part of the tuna that we like to eat. This is why women who eat a lot, pregnant women who eat a lot of mercury can have really unfortunate impacts on their fetus. Because they're basically filtering decades of atmosphere mercury for many hundreds of miles and pumping that to a fetus.
This is just like,
Yeah, it's a tragedy. We find this in PCBs, in the Inuit, all over the place. Are we done talking about that?
yeah.
Anybody want to ask me anything about bioaccumulation, magnification? It's a 3-star concept, guaranteed to be on the AP test. Then there's just one study goal left, number 58, and this one gets 1 star. Can someone tell me how everything is poisonous but nothing is poisonous? Yeah.
Basically, nothing can kill you in very, very, very small doses, but anything can kill you at the right dose.
That's pretty much right.
So if you have too much of anything, it will kill you.
Too much of anything, including water.
Yeah, you can die.
Can you die from having too much oxygen?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, you can.
Probably before
You can spontaneously.
I mean, look.
Can you die from eating too much carbon?
I'm glad that you're all talking about this, but we got to move a little bit further to the point of the conversation you're in now. Look, there's this thing called the dose-response curve, which means at some point, the dosage is irrelevant. Nothing is poisonous. And then whatever you're talking about, sooner or later you'll start to respond. And once you've overdosed on heroin, more isn't going to change anything.
You're dead.
That's the dose-response curve.
You're not going to be more.
Yeah,
Wait, so at the very bottom where it's like flat,
nothing.
is that you're not even having any of it?
No response. No, that's some dosage. That's some dosage, but no response yet. So remember, you all know that, like, cigarettes cause cancer? Okay, they actually don't. Because, like, if you all go home and you smoke 1 cigarette, I promise you you're not going to get cancer. Ask your doctor. You're not going to get cancer. Not from that. I'm serious. Like, if you can get your hands on 1 picogram of crystal meth, go ahead. You're fine. Go ahead. Just 1. Just 1 picogram, I said. You're fine.
1 hit.
You probably
Go to your dealer, picogram. Yeah.
No, that wasn't.
Obviously, nothing is bad for you on its own. The question is how much. And we have this misunderstanding in the public about toxicology. Everybody's freaked out about carcinogens. But we don't bother to ask, how much am I actually getting? That's a big distinction. When people are like, oh, there's pesticide in that food, you should be like, yes, and that's bad, but how much? Or there's carcinogens in your cosmetics. Well, yeah, okay, that's horrible, but how much? Because you've got bigger problems. When people get all uppity about rare, low concentration toxins, they are missing the forest for the trees. They're blowing it. Because They got way bigger fish to fry. Yeah.
Are you talking about like one-time occasions or like over time?
Doesn't matter. Look, you could have 1 nanogram of crystal meth every day for the rest of your life and you'd still be fine. Yeah.
He's tried it.
Yeah. And by the way, hold on. If I pick the wrong unit, you could have 1,000,000th of a nanogram every day for your life and then you'd be fine, right? Or 1,000,000,000th of a nanogram every day and then you'd be fine? At some point, the dosage is a big part of the question, even if you're repeating it. You're right, repetition is another part of that equation, because that changes your overall body burden, right? Yeah. But I get really uppity when people get all freaked out about, like, oh, this has something bad in it. And the real question is, of course, everything has, like, your body makes rat poison in really, really small volumes, but it does. Every one of you has mercury in your bodies. Every one of you has plutonium in your bodies, just in really small amounts. You don't have to worry about it. No. Okay. So we are done. We are done with 5.3. Now 5.4. 6.4. Eli, you're handsome and lovely. Get out of here. I mean, Raina, do you really want to do this? Is this like a big deal for you? Do you want to be a part of this? Okay. Like, I'm not doing this to limit your life. I wish we had more time, but we got to go quickly. First of all, in 6.4, subsidence is when the surface sinks because of underground water flow. Are you all aware that there's water moving underground everywhere you are? Yeah. Unless you're standing on bedrock, there's water under you. Clear? And I want to remind you of something from early in the year. You should just listen there. I want to remind you from something from early in the year. The thing that we talked about earlier, which is fast-moving water can carry boulders and school buses and houses and even your mom. But when water's moving very, very slowly, the only things it can move is the teeniest little silt. So remember that when water gets near the ocean, it flows under the ground. You can tell when you go dig a hole by the beach that there's water moving underground. And as that water moves, it carries away little tiny bits of silt, and here it comes. The surface slowly settles. That's called subsidence. So, has anybody here visited New Orleans or Venice, Italy? Are you aware that those cities are sinking into the ocean? Did you hear about that when you were there? Whatever. You heard about this? Everybody in Venice knows. Like, everybody in Italy's freaked out. They're like trying to build these massive things to like keep the ocean out. I'm not kidding. They're going to make tide blockers where the city will go like flip the switch and the thing will go like and keep out the high tide. What?
They also go down?
Yeah, everything's going to sink eventually. It's the stupidest plan. Those poor Italians. Second, there's a difference between direct and indirect effects. What are indirect effects of natural disasters? I'm going to give you an example. What else? Examples. Examples. Yeah.
Economic collapse, like the local areas that are affected.
Example.
Like all this, like no production and all the stores are just decimated and everything comes to a halt.
Like a specific disaster, maybe.
Like fisheries destroyed by like a hurricane.
Example.
Earthquake takes out all the power lines, like blackouts.
Is there an example? Yes.
Or like the California drought having all the farmers not produce enough food because of less water.
That's probably what we would call direct. An indirect example would be like Japan's economy is suffering because their energy prices went up because their earthquake made them shut off all of their nuclear power plants. Did you hear about that? How they had the Fukushima Daiichi power plant melt down in Japan a few years ago. There was an earthquake and then a tsunami, and the nuclear power plant melted. How many of you heard about this? So when the Fukushima Daiichi power plant melted down, they shut down all the nuclear power. The price of energy goes up. Because the price of energy goes up, it gets more expensive to do business. Because it gets more expensive to do business, Japan starts to go into recession. They become less competitive internationally. Korea and other countries can sell cheaper cell phones and cheaper cars. And Japan's economy takes a huge nosedive. When you add human factors and a longer time scale, you get to the indirect effects. Indirect effects is the stuff that happens after, the bigger picture. Any vocab questions at all? So I'd like to talk very quickly about Hurricane Katrina, which is number 59. How many of you remember this? You were probably in third grade or so.
I left I like Barcelona. We have a house there. Like it just like we were visiting and then right before it left, or right before it hit, we left.
No kidding.
Yeah.
Far out. So lucky you.
Yeah.
How'd your house survive? Not well.
No.
Okay, so I don't know if y'all have heard about Hurricane Katrina. I think New Orleans is like, it's another one of my many obsessions. I think that New Orleans is like a perfect metaphor for humanity and the environment. It has all the parts about social justice, poverty, and crime. It's really interesting. But to make you a really quick example, New Orleans is a perfect example of how our environmental interactions make us, over time, weaker as a society. Anybody know which examples I'm referring to in Hurricane Katrina in particular? I will go until the bell and I'll stop when you're talking. Anybody know examples of what I'm talking about in Hurricane Katrina?
What happened afterwards?
How did our interaction with that environment make us more susceptible to that disaster?
Wasn't it like we built disaster levees and then it made the destruction worse?
That was one thing, yeah. We had a lot of faith in technology and sort of messed with the water flow. What else?
As was being developed, the areas that used to be marshes dried up, and then we started building housing there, even though it was like below sea level.
Yeah. So first of all, we messed with the water. Then we started building too low where it was dry.
Wasn't something with the French Quarters, like architecture?
Then even funnier, we removed natural defenses.
My uncle did the plumbing in the French Quarter, and I think that's like.
Oh, he's the bad man.
Yeah.
So check it out. That area used to have 3 to 5 miles of coastal sandbars. That's why Louisiana and shrimp go together. Because it used to be shallow sand for miles in front of that city with mangrove swamps. And so whenever there was a storm, the waves would hit like 3-5 miles out that way, and nothing would happen in the land that is now New Orleans. But we cleared out all those mangroves because they raise the humidity and they block the wind and they give you a breeding site for mosquitoes, so that made sense. We got rid of the mangroves. And then we wanted to encourage shipping up and down the Mississippi, so we dredged out all of those sandbars. And effectively, if you look at that coastline, we built like a giant funnel for storm surge to flood the city. The city had natural defenses, and they like took off the armor, dropped their pants, and just waited for something to happen. As it happens, that's just one case. But a lot of the stuff that we're doing has made our society more susceptible to natural disasters. We solve problems like the shipping lane and the mosquitoes and the airflow. And then we find out later that that has consequences in our susceptibility to natural disasters. Number 60 is about those other factors, but we only have 1 minute. So somebody please remind me that tomorrow we've got kind of a hectic day. We'll have to finish the unit, do the stars, and maybe look at the exam.
Wait, what's the name of that? Like, when we remove something from the environment that we find out later that it was helpful? Wasn't there a name for that? Or,
Well,
no, like, I remember humans? Yeah, but I don't know. I might be remembering.
Oh, I just pulled out my lungs moment.
maybe you're talking about environmental